Dre said, yo, Rob, I want you to talk about killing somebody on this one. And I said, yo, nah, I wanted to talk about bringing somebody to life on this one. And what I do is a little different from what Dre do, man. So, you know, creative differences. The Dre thing popped off. You know, I had to come back. You know, I went back to the East Coast. Had to get my business head together. So, you know, I got my own label. Got my album coming out on my own label. So, you know, it was a lot of things I had to do.
Everything tied to Dr. Dre used to be about control. He was the mastermind, turning hungry rappers into platinum legends. But one quiet day at Aftermath Studios, the most silent guy in the room flipped the whole empire on its head. No shouting, no threats, just calm silence and one move that shook hip-hop forever. That was the day Rakim showed Dr. Dre exactly how powerful he really was.
Dre, you know, he make his kind of music and I like to make my kind. And, you know, we ain't understand how different we was until we got in the studio and started working together. My way, I guess, of talking crap is a little different. You want him to tell stories and, I guess, be a little disrespectful. The thing that I always said was like, Dre, man, we've been there, done that. I used to always run that by him, thinking he'd catch on.
Rakim, the one they call the God MC, had just signed with Aftermath Entertainment, Dre's heavyweight label. This wasn't just another comeback, it was meant to be a royal return to the throne. The album was called Oh My God, and the streets were going wild with hype. This was the lyrical genius who, way back in the late 80s, redefined how rhymes could be written. The same legend who helped shape Nas, Jay-Z, Eminem, and every other lyrical beast who came after. Now, he was teaming up with the mastermind behind the Chronic 2001, No One Can Do It Better, and the Slim Shady LP. On paper, this wasn't just a big deal, it looked like destiny. But inside that studio, something was off. Dr. Dre had a formula: dark, movie-style beats, heavy street stories, paranoia, drugs, and raw survival. It's the recipe that built Death Row, Aftermath, and pushed 50 Cent into the stratosphere. But Rakim, he wasn't built like the others. He wasn't chasing trends or radio hits. He was chasing something way bigger.
Me and Dre would sit down in the studio, and I started getting, you know, catching a pattern. Dre would be like, yo, why don't you, such and such, or we'll be talking and be like, yo, remember that story you told me the other day? Why don't you? I'm like, nah, Dre, that's reality, man. That's my man that's caught up in the bond, that's going through that shit. That's Dre, he would present a track. 9 times out of 10, he'd be like, I want you to, you know, talk crap on this one. But my way, I guess, of talking crap is a little different. You want him to tell stories, I guess, be a little disrespectful. The thing that I always said was like, Dre, man, we've been there, done that. I used to always run that by him, thinking he'd catch on. But like, nah, you know, this is what it is, and you know, this is what they respect. Is like, so you know, we tried. We did a couple joints here and there, but
I said, because you were on Truth Hurts.
Yeah, really, it didn't.
Rakim wasn't there to play tough. He was tough, but in a whole different league. And when Dre played that beat, laying out his vision, guns, gang talk, street drama, Rakim just sat there listening, stone cold silent. Then without a word, he stood up, took off his headphones, and walked out. No yelling, no drama, just raw principle. This wasn't about pride, and it wasn't just about staying true. Dre wanted Rakim to play a role, put on the costume of a street soldier. But Rakim, he wasn't built for fake tales or stage personas. He wasn't gonna spit bars about a life he didn't live. No noise, no diss tracks, no shade. Rakim dropped the realest move ever. He spoke his truth by walking away. See, Rakim didn't need Dre, but at that moment, Dre needed Rakim. It was the God MC versus the machine. Dre had a formula, and it wasn't just any formula. It was platinum science. He knew how to mold raw talent into chart-breaking legends. Massive beats, deep bass, wild stories, tracks soaked in vengeance, paranoia, and street heat.
He'd put on a beat, he'd sit next to me and be like, yo, I want you to talk that on this one. Like, Dre, that's what you say on every track you play, bro. Like, when you gonna let me rhyme on something? Well, I gotta, you know, beef with every
That recipe turned Snoop into a household name, lit up Eminem's career, and made 50 Cent a global force. But Rakim, he wasn't just another rapper trying to ride the wave. That was Rakim Allah, the architect, the man who flipped hip-hop's DNA overnight back in the 80s. He didn't come from that gangster lane. He came from a place of knowledge, sharp bars, and mind-blowing precision. Rakim didn't need to fake being hard. He was already certified. No rebrand, no image makeover, no gimmicks. When he walked into Aftermath, he came loaded with his own direction, his own vision, something deeper, something universal, something spiritual and elevated. But Dre, he wanted more of the same, that cookie-cutter street energy. But that wasn't Rakim. He wasn't going to spit bars about a lifestyle he never lived, and just like that, the tension hit. It was the God MC versus the formula. Dre tried to mold Rakim into the same template he used for everyone else, but Rakim, he created his own lane before Dre even had a label. He wasn't about to trash his legacy just to rap about fake wars, made up enemies, or crimes he never committed. So when Dre dropped a beat and said, "Here's the vibe," and it didn't match Rakim's mission, Rakim didn't throw a fit. He didn't start a shouting match. He just pulled off the headphones, stood up, and walked out. No chaos, no spectacle, just a silent, powerful refusal to sell out. And that's why the formula flopped. And guess what? Eazy-E saw it coming. Let's run it back.
In NWA.
Okay.
And he was a producer.
So Snoop Dogg was never with you?
Nah, he was never with me.
Okay. I noticed you're very short on those two names. You have very little to say.
I can talk about them all day. I mean, I make money from Dre and Snoop.
You could diss me all you want, but I'm gonna get paid. That's why I say Dre Day is only Eazy's payday. And that's real.
Why don't y'all just make up?
He already made up. You ain't never seen him with the lipstick and
no, I mean, no.
Because what went down between Rakim and Dre wasn't just some creative difference. It was history repeating itself. A ghost from the past stepped back into the spotlight, and that ghost's name, Eazy-E. Back in the early 90s, after NWA blew up and Dre split from Ruthless Records, Eazy-E felt straight up betrayed. But he didn't just clap back with petty talk. He hit Dre with one of the coldest diss tracks in rap history. Let's break it down. All of a sudden, Dr. Dre's the G-Thang, but on his old album covers, he was a she-thang. That wasn't just a diss, it was precision. Eazy was calling out Dre's whole image, saying, "You're not who you pretend to be." And Eazy-E didn't stop there. He hit hard. "You've been a studio gangster. You ain't got a clue of what you used to do. You think I forgot?" That line, studio gangster, blew up and became a whole thing in hip-hop. A term for rappers who spit street stories but never lived that life. All image, no roots. Rappers dressed up like gangsters, playing roles instead of keeping it real. And Eazy, he straight up claimed Dr. Dre was the original one. Even Dre once said in an interview, "Don't believe anything you hear." Fast forward to the year 2000, Dre's a global super producer now. He signs Rakim, the most authentic MC in the game. And what does he do? He tries to turn him into a gangster rapper. He hands him beats dripping in dark energy and says, "Talk that street talk." But Rakim, he don't fake nothing. Not for fame, not for sales.
He wanted me to do that, a gangster rap album, I guess, you know what I mean? And that's his formula, you know what I mean? But I thought at that point I should be doing something different.
So the second Dre started pushing that image that didn't match his truth, Rakim didn't lose it. He didn't throw shots or start a war, he just calmly walked away. No noise, just realness. And in that moment, Eazy's words came crashing back. Everything he warned about, smoke, mirrors, the fake persona, it was all still alive. But this time, Dre wasn't bumping heads with a West Coast rival. He was clashing with a man built on truth, a real MC who didn't move for money or fear. And when Rakim said no, Dre's whole formula cracked right open. So yeah, people can say what they want about Eazy's reasons. Maybe he was bitter, maybe he was being slick. But when he called Dr. Dre a studio gangster, looking back now, he might have been harsh, but he sure wasn't lying. Because when you try to turn a god into a gimmick, the god doesn't budge. That album, it never saw the light of day. Let's talk about the project that could have flipped the whole game. Oh my God. Just that title alone tells you what Aftermath was aiming for. Dr. Dre behind the boards, Rakim on the mic, West Coast beats clashing with East Coast brilliance. This wasn't just supposed to be a rap album, it was meant to be a moment in time, but it never dropped. Not even one full-length track hit the shelves. So what really went down? Let's break it down right. When Rakim signed with Aftermath in 2000, Dre was flying high. He had just reinvented himself with 2001, turned Eminem into a global monster, and was plotting the rise of 50 Cent. Every move Dre made back then turned into gold. But here's the catch. Dre's whole system worked best when he had the wheel. With M, he built the entire sound. With 50, same formula. Beats, image, the whole gangster narrative. Dre didn't just make music, he crafted products, but Rakim, he wasn't some new artist looking for direction. He walked into Aftermath already legendary. His tone, his topics, his message, already locked in. And that's where things hit a wall. Two titans, two visions, and no middle ground. A stalemate. Yeah, they recorded. Sessions happened, but the spark just wasn't there. The chemistry, missing, and some of Rakim's verses, they got chopped, flipped, and reportedly sprinkled across other Aftermath tracks.
Me and Dre would sit down in the studio, and Dre would be like, yo, remember that story you told me the other day? Won't you? Nah, Dre, that's reality, man. That's my man that's caught up in the bond, that's going through that shit. That's Dre's MO. He likes, that's what works for him. Dre, he would present a track, 9 times out of 10, he'd be like, I want you to talk crap on this. Dre's formula, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. He was loving, gangster rap. He wanted me to kind of, set it off and brag about, who I was and what I did. And I'm glad that he hollered at me, glad that he had a vision with me in mind, you know what I mean? I thanked him for that, but, we just couldn't find a medium where he was happy and I was happy with either the direction.
And it just so happened that, what I do is a little different from what Dre do, man. So, creative differences as far as Dre, he make his kind of music and I like to make my kind. And, we ain't understand how different we was until we got in the studio and started working together.
Only a few pieces of the project ever slipped through. One rare gem, a track called Rakim that ended up on the 8 Mile soundtrack. Just a small taste of what could have been legendary. Another verse surfaced on Truth Hurt's Addictive, with Dre on the production. There were rumors, whispers about 20 to 30 unreleased tracks locked up in the vault, but none of them ever saw daylight. Rakim stayed with Aftermath for 3 whole years, grinding from 2000 to 2003, trying to create something that blended his soul with Dre's sound. But in the end, the pressure, the creative tug of war, the constant push and pull, it was too much. And just like that, the most hyped rap album of the early 2000s vanished. No track list, no drop date, no official word, just a ghost album buried deep in Aftermath's vault, right alongside all the other unfinished Dre projects that never made it out. But this one stung more than the rest, because Oh My God had the potential to be a classic. Instead, it became one of hip-hop's biggest what-ifs. And here's the real twist. Rakim's silent exit hit harder than any diss track.
He was rapping so far ahead of everyone else at the time that I don't think there's ever been a rapper with a bigger gap. When there was Biggie, there was Pop. When there's Jay, there's Nas. And, there was always somebody right there in hip-hop. When it was Rakim, it was Rakim.
In hip-hop, silence is usually seen as weakness. If someone disses you and you don't clap back, people think you folded, took the L. But Rakim, he flipped that whole idea on its head. When Dr. Dre, arguably the most powerful producer in rap, tried to shape Rakim into a gangster role that didn't fit his truth, Rakim didn't fire back on a track. He didn't hit up Hot 97, didn't flame him on MTV, he didn't even slide in any subliminal bars. Nothing, just silence. And that's what made it legendary. In a culture where clout is king and attention is everything, Rakim proved that real strength doesn't always need a mic. Sometimes, the most gangster move is walking away from the game completely. Let's be real. Hip-hop's the kind of game where artists get disrespected on camera, then drop full mixtapes just to clap back. Where rap beefs turn into album promo and staying quiet. That's usually seen as weakness. But Rakim, he didn't need to bark to prove power. He didn't have to flex a verse. His name alone was the flex. By the time he linked with Aftermath in 2000, Rakim wasn't chasing validation. He was already a legend's legend. He didn't owe Dre anything. If anything, Dre owed him. Every MC Dre helped elevate. Eminem, 50 Cent, The Game, they all studied Rakim, whether they said it or not. His rhyme schemes, his breath control, his way with words. Rakim taught that. He wasn't just a rapper, he was the blueprint. So when Dre tried to box him into a formula filled with scripted street tales, fake gangster vibes, and slick packaged drama, Rakim didn't fold, he didn't explode, he just went silent, and that silence said everything. It showed that Rakim wasn't willing to trade identity for airplay. Even in an era when gangster rap ruled everything, from BET to the Billboard charts, he wouldn't dress up as something he wasn't just to win over the mainstream. Read that again. That's not ego, that's conviction. And how many rappers today can really say that? We've watched artists switch up overnight just to ride trends, rapping about bodies they never caught, blocks they never touched, and lives they never lived, all just to fit the image. But Rakim, he walked away from one of the biggest stages in the game just to stay real with himself. Now that's legendary. Let that sink in for a second. And what's even wilder, Dre never denied it, never clapped back, no interviews, no pushback, nothing. Why? Because deep down, Dre knew the truth. He knew that Rakim's silence hit harder than any diss ever could. See, anybody can hop in the booth and throw shots. That's the easy part. But walking away, knowing the media's gonna come knocking, knowing the label's gonna panic, knowing fans will start guessing, and still choosing silence, that takes a kind of self-respect most artists just don't have, and that shook Dre to the core. Let's be real, Dre was used to running the show. He molded Snoop, he crafted M, he sculpted the 50s whole image. But Rakim, he was untouchable.
Was arguably the first person to really push the boundaries of what rapping could be and introduce complex lyrics and rhyme schemes to set hip-hop on the path that we know.
He wasn't some young MC begging for a cosign. He was already etched into hip-hop's Mount Rushmore. He didn't need Aftermath. He didn't need Dre. He didn't need some made-up storyline. What he needed, and refused to compromise, was the truth in his voice. And when Dre asked him to fake it, Rakim bounced. No beef, no social media jabs, no sneak disses, just straight up discipline. Because sometimes the loudest statement is silence. Rakim's legacy versus Dr. Dre's machine, that's what this was. Now don't get it twisted. Dre built an empire, no question. He's the architect behind some of the biggest names in the game. Snoop Dogg, Eminem, 50 Cent, The Game, Kendrick Lamar. That's a serious lineup. But that empire, it ran like a machine. Every artist who came through Dre's doors got reshaped, rebranded, polished. From their sound to their story, Dre controlled it all. Beats, bars, and branding. Now line that machine up against Rakim, the man who needed no edits, no makeover, no coaching, no direction, because Rakim didn't rise from hype. He rose off pure skill, and no machine in the world could replicate that. Rakim didn't need viral moments or internet beefs to make noise. He had bars, bar for bar, flow for flow. Rakim was light years ahead of his time. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, most rappers still rhyme like Run DMC, straightforward and basic. Then Rakim stepped in with internal rhyme patterns, layered metaphors, and that calm, godlike presence on the mic. Every bar felt like a sermon, like wisdom dropped from another dimension. The streets respected him, scholars admired him, and the next generation, they straight up worshipped him. Even Dr. Dre knew exactly who he had on his hands. He didn't sign Rakim by accident. Dre thought, if I can plug this legend into my formula, I'll create the greatest album of all time. But here's where Dre slipped. He underestimated the fact that Rakim wasn't built to be plugged in. His art didn't come from gangster stories or label-made strategies. It came from truth, from knowledge, from a deeper spiritual place. And that's not something you can just pair with gun bars and club bangers. That was the real clash. Not just sound versus sound, but principle versus product. Rakim's legacy was all about authenticity, about reshaping the mind of hip-hop. Dre's machine, it was about dominance, about moving units and building icons. One was timeless, the other was tactical, and when those two collided, the machine blinked because Rakim couldn't be packaged. He couldn't be cloned, molded, or mass-produced. He wasn't made for hip-hop. He helped make hip-hop. So here's the million-dollar question. What happened to the music? If Rakim and Dr. Dre really spent years locked in the studio, where's the heat? Where are all those tracks people swore were recorded? And how did one of the most hyped collabs in rap history turn into one of hip-hop's biggest unsolved mysteries?
One of the greatest things about Rakim to me was he would use words that you've heard this word rhyme before, but it'd almost be like girl and world. You'd expect him to rhyme that, and he's rhyming plural and rural.
Let's break it down. When Rakim signed with Aftermath in 2000, it shook the whole industry. This wasn't some rookie landing a deal. This was Rakim, the God MC, teaming up with the genius who reshaped West Coast hip-hop. Fans expected a classic, a culture-shifting masterpiece, the ultimate blend of East Coast wisdom and West Coast production firepower. The album was reportedly titled Oh My God, and according to Rakim himself, they got busy in the studio. Some say 20 tracks, others say 30. Full sessions, verses, hooks, entire songs. But that's where things started falling apart. The vision, that's what killed the album. Dre had his style, dark, cinematic, and soaked in street energy. Think The Chronic 2001. Think Get Rich or Die Trying. He wanted Rakim to step into that same mold. But Rakim, he came with something deeper. He wanted to drop gems about growth, spirituality, responsibility, not fantasy shootouts and street legends that never existed. That philosophical collision turned into a slow implosion, month after month, year after year. Tracks were made, then shelved, beats got built, then scrapped, verses were recorded, then cut, and all the while, the label clock was ticking louder. Eventually, Aftermath started shifting focus elsewhere. The attention faded, the momentum fizzled, and that legendary album, it faded into the shadows, still locked in the vault, with fans left wondering what could have been. Then 50 Cent stepped into the spotlight. Eminem was blowing up, the Aftermath machine was printing hits, and Rakim's album, it kept getting pushed further and further back. And then, just like that, it was gone. No official statement, no farewell post, no press release, just silence. A few tracks managed to slip through the cracks. R.A.I.M. showed up on the 8 Mile soundtrack. Classic Rakim bars riding over a Dre-style beat. But even that gem, it didn't get the full push it deserved. There was also that brief moment on Truth Hurt's Addictive, just enough to remind people the legend was still out here, but far from his true form. And beyond that, everything else turned into hip-hop folklore, unreleased, unmastered, unleaked, just whispers. Here's the wild part. Those songs are still locked away inside the Aftermath vaults. Nobody's heard them, not even a single snippet. You'd think after all these years something would have leaked. A demo, a radio rip, anything. But nah, Dre runs a tight operation. He's known for keeping unreleased tracks locked down. Even his own long-awaited album Detox turned into myth. Which means those Rakim sessions, they might never see daylight. And that's the part that stings. Because in another world, on another timeline, if these two giants had just found a middle ground, we might have gotten a classic that shifted the entire culture. Instead, all we've got are stories, old interviews, half facts, and one question that's haunted hip-hop for over 20 years. What if? What if Rakim had given just a little? What if Dre had loosened the grip on the formula? What if the industry had actually let the album breathe? We'll never know, but man, that mystery might be the biggest heartbreak in hip-hop history. We may never know the full story, but one thing's for sure, whatever music they created during those Aftermath sessions, it's still out there, somewhere, sitting in a vault, on a dusty hard drive, maybe locked in a studio server, just waiting, and maybe, just maybe, one day it'll surface. But until that day comes, Oh My God remains one of hip-hop's most haunting, what could have been moments. A lost scroll, a missing masterpiece, the album that almost changed everything. When legends salute a legend, when Rakim speaks, even the greats stop and listen. He never needed a summer anthem or a trending headline to stay relevant. No scandals, no stunts, just the pen. And that pen made the gods of rap take notes. Jay-Z said it loud. Eminem's dropped his name in interview after interview. And even Dr. Dre, years after their creative split, still speaks on Rakim with nothing but respect. Because Rakim didn't just influence rappers, he sparked the architects of the culture. The ones at the top, they all look back and point to Rakim as the blueprint, the reason they picked up the mic in the first place. Sometimes staying true to yourself hits harder than chasing the charts. And while Oh My God never dropped, and we may never hear those tracks, the message is crystal clear. Real recognizes real. And Rakim, he proved that even in silence, he still speaks the loudest. Some chase fame, but a chosen few walk away from it and become legends. If you felt this story, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives like this, and don't forget to drop a comment and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Let's keep the culture alive.